Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining the session on the new communication on progress, Introduction to the Labor section. My name is Bernard Frey, and I'm Senior Manager on SDG Impact and Reporting at the UN Global Compact. This session can be accessed on demand on the Academy platform of the UN Global Compact. Our aim for today is to provide context and information on the questions in the labor section of the Communication on Progress questionnaire. The labor section has strong similarities with the human rights section and the other sections of the questionnaire, in alignment with the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and ILO conventions. It is important to note the interconnectedness between all sections of the questionnaire. For example, the governance section outlines the processes and governance structures that also help companies address their impacts on labor rights. Please watch the recorded sessions on the governance section and on the human rights section of the questionnaire of the Communication on Progress for more information. As explained in introductory sessions, the Communication on Progress questionnaire is organized into 5 sections: governance, human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. The governance section provides a cross-cutting overview of a company's sustainability governance structure, while the remaining 4 sections go into greater detail on topics aligning with the 10 principles. Within each section of the questionnaire, the questions are grouped in different categories, as they typically address the processes and policies that demonstrate a company's commitment to advance sustainability topics connected to the 10 principles, efforts undertaken to prevent or mitigate negative social and environmental impact, performance indicators, and remediation and reporting mechanisms to address grievances and reflect on lessons learned. In the human rights section, participants are asked at the very beginning to identify the material human rights topics. Based on this selection, and only for the topics identified as material by the company, follow-up questions in the human rights section may appear, grouped again under commitment, prevention, performance, and remediation and reporting. Please see the on-demand session on the introduction into the human rights section on our UN Global Compact Academy. It is important to note that the company will be asked in the labor section of the questionnaire about specific labor rights topics connected to the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, regardless if the company selected them as material in the human rights section. The labor topics that the company will be asked in any case are freedom of association and the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining, child labor, forced labor, non-discrimination and respect of employment and occupation, and safe and healthy working environment. In addition, only if a participant selected working conditions as a material human rights topic in the human rights section will questions appear for that topic in the labor section of the questionnaire. Let us now have a closer look at the questions in the labor section. Under the groupings outlined before, we will see different topics addressed in the labor section of the questionnaire connected to our 10 principles. Under the grouping of commitment, the labor section contains questions on labor policies that demonstrate the company's commitment to advance those topics. This question asks about specific labor rights policy commitments. Policy commitments create a clear and common goal for driving improvements. They can help companies identify and manage risks, mitigate negative impacts, and structure a response for incidents by providing a process to address these issues. An organization should select no, but we but we plan to in the next 2 years if they believe that they will have a policy in place related to the corresponding labor topic within 2 years. An organization can select not applicable if the topic is not material to their business. Selecting yes, included within a broader policy or as a standalone policy will prompt 2 follow-up questions, L11 and L12, that we will discuss in the next slide. We ask participants to respond with the most recent year the policy was reviewed. In order to remain effective and relevant, policy should be reviewed on a consistent basis. L11 seeks further detail on the nature of the organization's labor rights policies. For instance, if they are approved at the most senior level of the company and/or aligned with international labor standards. The company will also be asked if the policies apply to its own operations or also to the value chain. The value chain includes not only suppliers, but also consumers, communities, and other business relationships. The company can select this option if their policies apply to part of the value chain. For instance, some suppliers, and in addition, some consumers or other business relationships. And then briefly provide additional information in the text box about which business relationships are covered. The question L12 asks about more information on the company's policy on freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining. In the answer choices, some terms appear that we would like to explain here. One answer option refers to prohibiting any acts of interference in trade unions. Interference is any act designed to prevent the establishment of workers' organizations under the nomination of employers or employers' organizations, or to support workers' organizations by financial or other means, with the object of placing them under the control of employers or their organizations. ILO Convention number 98 concerning the right to organize and collective bargaining includes protection against anti-union discrimination and interference. Another answer option refers to providing trade union representatives with information required for meaningful bargaining in the context of bona fide negotiations. Bona fide, or bargaining in good faith, means that parties are free to engage in bargaining and there should be no interference from the authorities in their decisions to do so. The principle of good faith implies that the parties make every effort to reach an agreement, conduct genuine and constructive negotiations, avoid unjustified delays in negotiations, respect agreements concluded and applied in good faith, and give sufficient time to discuss and settle collective disputes. In the case of multinational enterprises, such companies should not threaten to transfer the whole or part of an operating unit from the country concerned in order to unfairly influence negotiations. You can find more information in the revised guidebook of the Communication on Progress. The prevention portion of this section addresses steps taken to prevent or mitigate adverse impacts. Once your company has established a policy and conducted appropriate risk and impact assessments, it should take the necessary steps to seize, prevent, or mitigate adverse impact. In this context, offering capacity building and engaging with relevant stakeholders is important. Training disclosures give insights into how a company embeds its policy commitment for responsible conduct. The assessment of progress is needed to understand the effectiveness of policies and actions to prevent or mitigate adverse impacts and to drive continuous improvement. This question addresses stakeholder engagement. which enhances outcomes on labor rights topics by incorporating a broad set of perspectives on an issue. Engagement with affected stakeholders or their representatives is a key part of due diligence and risk assessment processes. Affected stakeholders are individuals whose human rights have been or may be affected by a company's operations, products, or services, and can include customers, employees, suppliers, and communities. In their assessment, business enterprises should pay special attention to any particular impacts on individuals from groups or populations that may be at heightened risk of vulnerability or marginalization, and bear in mind the different risks that may be faced by women and men. Wherever possible, businesses should consult affected stakeholders directly in a manner that takes into account language and other potential barriers to effective engagement. Organizations can select no engagement on this topic in instances where this labor topic is not material to the organization and can provide additional information regarding their selection in the text box. Once a company has established a policy and conducted appropriate risk and impact assessment, it should take the necessary steps to seize, prevent, or mitigate the impact. There are a variety of ways for a company to attempt to prevent or mitigate negative impacts, such as conducting an audit, participating in collective action, or collaborating with governmental or regulatory bodies. Companies also have the option to detail other actions they're taking by selecting the other option. They can select the answer, no action within reporting period, if they have not yet implemented any activity, or if the specific labor topic is not material to them. Disclosing on question L4 on training gives insight into how the organization embeds its policy commitments for responsible business conduct, including the commitment to respect labor rights throughout its activities and business relationships. Training should be the systematic transfer of knowledge through courses, certifications, and/or regular distribution of relevant communications and information, which helps ensure that people at all levels act responsibly and with awareness of and respect for labor rights. All employees, from line workers to C-suite, benefit from effective labor rights training, and they may be of particular benefit for business relationships down the value chain, such as suppliers. Organizations can select no training provided in instances where this labor issue is not material to the organization and can provide additional information regarding their selection. Question L5 asks how the company assesses progress in preventing or mitigating risks. An organization should track and monitor its efforts to learn if its policies and processes are being implemented optimally and to drive continuous improvement. Organizations may respond with other in order to customize this response and will be prompted to provide further information. Under the grouping performance, participants will answer questions related to existing collective bargaining agreements, the percentage of women in leadership positions, pay ratio between women and men, injury frequency, and incident rates. L6 asks the participant if the existing collective bargaining agreements provide more favorable rights than those provided by legislation. More favorable conditions can be provided in relation to wages, working hours, health coverage, and sick leave, among others. Participants can also indicate if the company has no existing collective bargaining agreements. Question L7 aims to understand gender gaps at the highest level of leadership within a company. It is expressed as the number of women in managerial positions divided by the total number of managerial positions in a given reporting period. Organizations can use either employees or full-time equivalents, FTEs, and should report this metric at the end of the reporting period. Identification of managerial roles should align with internal job classifications and checklists, and/or occupational classification system endorsed by the meeting of experts in labor statistics. Managerial positions can include, for instance, C-suites and managing directors. You will find more information on how to calculate this indicator in the guidebook of the communication on progress. A company that does not track this indicator can choose to select unknown, but is strongly encouraged to track this indicator going forward. Question L8 asks what the average ratio of the basic salary and remuneration of women to men during the reporting period was. Promoting equal pay for work of equal value or pay equity is a fundamental right at work enshrined in ILO conventions. For each job level or category, companies should calculate the ratio of gross hourly earnings paid to female and male employees and report the average ratio of earnings across job categories, women to men, as a percent. If, on average, women earn 1% less across job categories than men, the answer to this question would be 99%. Companies can choose to select unknown if the ratio is not measured or choose to not disclose. If a company chooses not to disclose, it will be prompted to provide an explanation. Question L9 asks how frequently were workers injured. Types of work-related injury can include death, amputation of a limb, fracture, burns, and paralysis, among others. Injuries involving members of the public as a result of a work-related incident are not included in this disclosure. The frequency rate is calculated in the following way. Number of recordable work-related injuries divided through the total number of hours worked by workers in the reporting period. This indicator is related to the number of injuries during the reporting period. Data on work-related injuries is a measure of the extent of harm suffered by workers. It is not a measure of safety. Companies can choose to select unknown if the frequency rate is not measured. Furthermore, companies can choose to not disclose. If they do so, they will be prompted to provide an explanation. Question L10 asks about the company's incident rate. This indicator is related to the number of workdays lost due to occupational accidents, injuries, and diseases during the reporting period. It suggests the effectiveness of an entity's employee health and safety policy and its ability to build a healthy, safe, and productive work environment. The incident rate is calculated in the following way. Total number of days expressed in terms of number of hours divided through the total number of hours worked by workers in the reporting period. Workers here are employees and do not include contractors, vendors, or external consultants. This indicator should also reflect reporting on mental health and stress. Companies can choose to select unknown if the incident rate is not measured. Furthermore, companies can choose to not disclose. If they do so, they will be prompted to provide an explanation. More information on how to calculate the frequency rate and the incident rate in relation to injuries and/or diseases can be accessed in the guidebook of the communication on progress. Finally, companies should have processes to respond to potential incidents, remediate to the best extent possible, and share actions to avoid further incidents and build transparency. Under the grouping remediation and reporting, participants will answer questions on the provision of remedy and about additional activities implemented. Even with sound policies and practices in place, a business may still cause or contribute to an adverse impact that it has not foreseen or been able to prevent. Where a business enterprise identifies such a situation, whether through its due diligence process or other means, its responsibility to respect labor rights requires active engagement in remediation, by itself or in cooperation with other actors. This question asks about potential solutions to adverse impacts generated by a company. Here, remedy means to counteract or make good a negative impact. Some situations, in particular where crimes are alleged, typically will require cooperation with judicial mechanisms. This question also allows you to answer choose to not disclose. If you select this option, you will need to provide a brief explanation. If no adverse impacts have been identified and/or caused, and therefore no remedy needs to be provided, a company may select no adverse impact identified or caused. This open text question is for companies to provide further context and/or relevant information related to labor rights not covered through the question, including additional actions implemented, goals set, or challenges faced. Thank you very much for your attention today.